Good evening, everyone. My name is Caden Hansel. I am here to present the Battle of Monte Cassino. About 130 kilometers southeast of Rome, in the Italian region of Lazio, sits the hill known as Monte Cassino. The fortress of Monte Cassino, an ancient monastery, is the reason it is most well known. A monastery is a residence or community of monks or nuns that live a straightforward communal life centered around prayer, work, and service as part of their spiritual objectives. Generally speaking, monasteries are linked to specific religious traditions including Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. It is located atop the peak at Monte Cassino. Significant religious, cultural, and historical value is attributed to the Abbey of Monte Cassino. Founded by Saint Benedict of Nursia in the 6th century AD, it grew to become one of Europe's most significant Christian centers. The monastery drew monks and pilgrims from all across the continent as it functioned as a center of study, research, and spirituality. The rough terrain and organic barriers surrounding Monte Cassino provided an advantageous location for the Germans to carefully arrange their defenses. Because the monastery itself was perched on a hill, the defenders had a commanding view of the surroundings and could regulate important approaches. Around Monte Cassino, the Germans carefully fortified their positions with defensive barriers such as minefields, bunkers, barbed wire, and trenches. A British soldier named Jim Knox is quoted saying, "Our biggest fear were landmines. They were everywhere." The defensive forces had cover and protection from all these fortifications, which hindered the Allies' ability to advance. They used machine guns, sandbag walls, and many other camouflage weapons to fend off oppositions. In order to move across Italy and ultimately destroy Nazi Germany, the Allies' larger strategic goal during World War II required them to breach Monte Cassino. Situated strategically in the Gustav Line, Monte Cassino was part of the German fortifications built to obstruct the Allied advance through Italy. By taking Monte Cassino, the Allies would be able to break through the Gustav Line and make more northward advances possible. German resistance and defiance were symbolized by the monastery perched atop Monte Cassino. In addition to being strategically important, capturing the monastery and its surrounding area would be highly symbolic, raising Allied spirits and proving their progress in the Italian War. Monte Cassino also was situated near the main train and road lines that connected to Rome, the Italian capital. The Allies may take control of key transportation routes and open the door for Rome's liberation by seizing Monte Cassino and breaching the Gustav Line. This offense would need to break the line in order to advance forward. Strategic importance. Germany had such strong importance to a thing called the Gustav Line. You may be questioning what this Gustav Line is. In central Italy, the Gustav Line served as a German defensive line during World War II. General Gustav von Senger, the German general in charge of building it, is the name given to it. From the west coast along the Tyrrhenian Sea to the east coast along the Adriatic Sea, the Gustav Line cut through the Italian peninsula. As it passed through the mountainous areas like the Apennine Mountains, it served as a natural barrier for defense. Several important defensive strongpoints, including Monte Cassino, the Rapido River bridges, and the town of Cassino itself, were incorporated into the Gustav Line. German forces had these locations well defended and reinforced, making them difficult targets for Allied forces to advance. This line was enforced to protect inner cities such as Rome. The Allies had continued the invasion and worked further and further into Italy. The vision of victory motivated them as their tired bodies worked through the mountainous terrain Italy had brought. The biggest blockade was sitting in front of them as they made it to Monte Cassino. The unthinkable mission of getting to Rome was on the line. If the Allies could take such a well-known location from German hands, the fight could drastically be ripped away. This kept the fighters fighting, knowing that they needed to advance and hit Germany with one of the biggest gut punches yet. On the other hand, Germany was defending Italy with everything. Italy had a wealth of resources, including agricultural land, industrial capacity, and raw materials. In particular, as the war progressed and resource shortages grew more severe, Germany attempted to take advantage of Italy's resources to help its war effort and strengthen its economy. Germany's pride was in the hands of the Allied soldiers as attempted to rush home. They had to cross the Garigliano and Rapido rivers and then fight looking upward at the Germans atop the hill. The Germans left no bridges for the soldiers to cross, which left them with very hard challenges. The boot was a nickname given to Italy as the United States invaded. The importance that Italy had was shown through war. Italy was strategically important due to its location in the Mediterranean for naval operations, commerce routes, and military force mobility between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. It commanded access to the Mediterranean Sea. The British successfully crossed the Garigliano River on January 17th, showing a promising sign as this was the first attempt to do so. This caused Germany's leader Kesselring to pull troops from Rome and head toward the British push. Meanwhile, 2 days later, the U.S. troops had attempted a river crossing on the Rapido River, which ended in disaster. The boats and rafts used had been obliterated before many even got away from the river's edge. Those who did get across had no support by foot or air. They were on their own. This was known as one of the most disastrous outcomes in World War II. First fire. The month of January 1944 consisted of British, American, French, and even troops from New Zealand trying to push into Monte Cassino. This was labeled as one of 4 attacks in this battle. They had gained enough ground to let ammunition fly, but were having very little success as they were trying to climb a nearly shut-out hill. A month of staring up at the monastery that they could not compete with. They had decided that the only way to advance to Rome was to destroy this monastery. Germany had made a promise to not use this building as a base, but rumors had spread. The Allies also thought that even though they might not be occupying this building currently, they would likely hold it as a strongpoint very soon. If the Allies were to make a push, the Germans would have one building to run to. On the 15th of February, Allied aircrafts dropped over 1,000 tons of high explosives on the monastery. This left the area it sat upon and surrounding locations in shambles. The neighboring buildings of the monastery suffered significant damages as a result of the air raids. The historic abbey and the representation of Christian legacy and exquisite architecture was reduced to ruins. Many, especially those in the ranks of Allies, felt angry by the devastation and questioned the necessity of the bombardment. What dug the hole deeper was the fact that 230 innocent people were killed as they sheltered in what was supposed to be a safe and neutral zone. The book called The Monuments Men states, "The rest of the world did not cheer. Instead, the Germans and Italians turned the tables on the Allies, suggesting that if this was what the world could expect, then the Allies were barbarians and the traitors." Cardinal Maglione, speaking for Vatican, called the destruction of the abbey a colossal blunder and a piece of gross stupidity. Once the bombing was settled, German troops moved into the mess of a town and used it as cover. Meanwhile, the Allied troops on the ground were unaware of this planned bombing, which caused even more casualties for them. This lack of communication proved to be devastating. Here is video of these bombs.
The Abbey on the crest of Monte Cassino. Before we take you through each phase of its bombing, we visit an abbey in Kent for an exclusive interview granted by the Lord Abbot of Pershore and Nashton. Head of an Anglican community of Benedictine monks, the abbot makes these observations.
Benedictine monks all over the world will regret the destruction of the abbey on Monte Cassino, for it was there that St. Benedict wrote the rule, which is that of all Benedictine monks. Regrettable though the bombing and shelling the monastery may be, it would appear that our military leaders had no choice in the matter. If its preservation would have meant the prolonging of the war, or the loss of perhaps hundreds of our soldiers, its destruction was more than justified.
On February the 14th, the Allied command took steps to warn the occupants of the impending bombardment. This took the form of leaflets printed in Italian and English to be dropped over the building by special shells. This warning was made to enable Italian refugees and all those other than the enemy to seek shelter away from the monastery. German soldiers were known to be using the great building as an observation post. They made it the main bastion of the Gustav Line, The leaflets were scattered over the building in this manner. On the following day, fortresses, Mitchells, and marauders, a squadron at a time, showered high explosives on the Abbey every 20 minutes or so. After careful deliberation and with every reluctance, the decision was executed. Another wave comes. For 2 hours, the blows were maintained. The German troops were by now reported to be seeking escape. Shell fire was added to pepper the slopes and demolish other hideouts on the massif. Sound cameras catch this amazing scene. Again that awful drone of aircraft, and the thunder of bombs cutting craters in the huge walls. Vapor trails form strange patterns around the 1,600-foot massif. The noise of bombardment echoing back and forth among the mountains, ringing Cassino. Of this sad but absolutely necessary operation, little can be added to what has already been said. Where'er the Germans carry war, there also must inevitably follow death and destruction. A long hesitation to act as we did was what they expected. There is no respect for sanctuary in the German curriculum of war.
As you can see, this left the once cherished monastery in shambles. Operation Shingle. A significant Allied amphibious operation during World War II is known as the attack on Anzio. The goal of Operation Shingle was to create a beachhead at Anzio, which is roughly 30 miles south of Rome, behind German defenses. The idea was to threaten German soldiers in central Italy by outflanking the fiercely fortified Gustav Line, which would eventually make Rome easier to take. General Mark W. Clark led the Allied Fifth Army, which began Operation Shingle on January 22, 1944. Simultaneously with the amphibious attack was the major offense known as Operation Diadem of Monte Cassino, which took place further south and targeted the Gustav Line. The army that participated in the amphibious assault at Anzio was mainly made up of American and British soldiers. Allied forces from Canada, France, and other countries participated in the operation as well, with air and naval support. This video represents what the attack on Anzio planned to do.
Anzio, a small Italian fishing and tourist town on the Tyrrhenian Sea, famous for its Roman ruins and the birthplace of the emperors Nero and Caligula, would assume historical importance during World War II. In 1943, a plan had evolved for the British and Americans to help relieve some of the pressure felt by the Soviet Union. Stalin was anxious that the Western Allies opened the second front somewhere, but the only viable location at that time was in Italy. Allied operations across the Mediterranean following the defeat of Axis forces in North Africa meant that Hitler had to leave substantial forces in southern France, Italy, and the Balkans to guard his southern flank, preventing their deployment on the Eastern Front, therefore limiting his strategy there. By late 1943, the British and American campaign in Italy had become bogged down, the mountainous country favoring the Axis defenders, and the Germans moving from one heavily defended line across the peninsula to another. In Italy, mules were more useful than motor vehicles in the rugged landscape. The many fast-flowing rivers posed serious impediments on the Allied advance north, the Germans blowing the bridges as they went, coupled with extreme weather conditions such as torrential rains and thick mud in the autumn and deep snow in the winter. The campaign in Italy was some of the toughest fighting of the European campaign. However, the way to break this stalemate was to launch a surprise landing in the Germans' rear, and that place was at Anzio, 25 kilometers south of Rome. A stalemate had developed south of the town of Cassino on the Gustav Line, the fight for its famous mountaintop abbey taking months. Cassino led to the Anzio operation. Advance from Anzio, link up with Allied troops coming north from Cassino, and march on Rome. The build-up of forces for the operation took place at Naples in early 1944. The problems were numerous. Many in the Allied camp thought the operation entirely too risky. Compared to the D-Day invasion in Normandy 5 months later, the Anzio operation was starved of vital equipment and shipping. Only 2 infantry divisions could be landed in the initial wave, followed by 2 more. By the 21st of January 1944, the task force was moving towards Anzio. The 2 divisions making the initial assault were both veterans, the British 1st Infantry Division and the US 3rd Infantry Division. In overall command was US Lieutenant General Mark Clark. Incredibly, when the landings commenced on the 22nd of January, there was initially no resistance. Why? Because, in concert with the landings, the Allies had launched a fresh offensive at Cassino, which led the Germans to move much of their forces south to strengthen the Gustav Line. The Luftwaffe tried to harass the landings at Anzio using Stukas and other bombers, but the Germans didn't have sufficient aircraft in Italy to pose a serious threat. Only fragmentary German units could initially oppose the landings. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, the German Commander-in-Chief Italy, had a stellar reputation, and he moved very fast to contain the Anzio beachhead. He put General von Mackensen in charge of eliminating the beachhead. Within 24 hours of the landings, Mackensen had pieces of 8 German divisions in position. At dawn on the 25th of January, the Anglo-Americans began to push out from the beachhead. German resistance was both ferocious and unmovable. Over 3 days of heavy combat, the beachhead was slightly expanded, but at very high cost. By now, the Allies had 4 infantry divisions ashore. By the end of January, the Allies had suffered 3,000 casualties. The offensive was halted. The Anzio beachhead now prepared for a siege. But how long till Mackensen counterattacked? More German divisions and aircraft were moved down from northern Italy, from southern France and the Balkans. By mid-February 1944, in the centre, the beachhead had been pushed back by the Germans. A further Allied offensive south to breach the Gustav Line failed. Anzio was now on its own. Huge German assaults commenced, met by ferocious Allied artillery fire, including from ships offshore. Allied bombers also pounded the Germans, breaking up the German assaults. A new overall commander at Anzio, US Major General Lucien Truscott, was appointed. What followed was a 3-month-long period of static warfare. Everywhere was in range of German guns, a situation not dissimilar to the British position at Gallipoli in World War I, when the beachhead there was contained by the Turks. Both sides entered artillery duels. The Germans even brought up 2 massive railway guns, codenamed Roland and Leopold. These were used to bombard the Anzio beachhead, the Allies collectively nicknaming the guns Anzio Annie. Constant patrol activity and raiding took place all round the perimeter. The positions on both sides resembled the trenches of World War I. The German Navy also intervened, launching human torpedo attacks on Allied shipping off Anzio in a desperate attempt to prevent the Allies from landing more men for a breakout attempt. But many more reinforcements were sent into Anzio, preparatory to a new offensive. A fresh push was launched in the south against the Gustav Line. It took a week of heavy combat, but this time the southern force.
With a soon-to-come attack on Anzio, the Allied sources predicted soldiers to be pulled away from Monte Cassino. With that, the Third Battle of Monte Cassino happened. It was marked by significant deaths on both sides and furious, prolonged fighting. With determination, the Germans held their position, making good use of the rough terrain and strong defenses. In the third assault, the Allies failed to take Monte Cassino despite their best efforts. The conflict dragged on for several more months, with the hill staying in German hands. After months of fierce warfare and several failed attempts by the Allies to seize Monte Cassino and breach the Gustav Line, Operation Diadem was launched on May 11, 1944. There were lengthy preparations conducted prior to the offensive, such as logistical buildup, artillery bombardments, and surveillance. Several different countries and military branches launched a concerted assault as part of Operation Diadem. With the assistance of significant aviation and naval resources, the main Allied forces engaged in the offense were Britain, American, Polish, Canadian, Indian, and French forces. To overwhelm German forces and take advantage of holes in their positions, Operation Diadem was a series of well-conducted attacks along the Gustav Line To accomplish its goals, the attack used infantry, assaults, armored thrusts, and artillery barrages. After fierce combat, the Allies were able to take Monte Cassino on May 18, 1944, as a part of Operation Diadem. An important turning point in the battle was reached when the strategically important hill and its monastery were taken, opening the door for additional Allied military advances. After taking Monte Cassino, the Allies proceeded to push northward, eventually breaking through the Gustav Line and defeating the Germans. One of the main goals of Operation Diadem was accomplished when the Allies conquered Rome on June 4, 1944, a little more than 3 weeks after it began. An important Allied success in the Italian campaign, Operation Diadem was a pivotal moment in the war in Italy. The offensive proved to be successful in demonstrating the efficiency and coordinated Allied operation, and severely damaged German military capabilities and morale in the area. The mess that was made in Cassino was very hard to put into words. General Mark Clark has stated that the battle for the Cassino was the most grueling, the most harrowing, and in one respect the most tragic of any phase of the war in Italy. An estimated death for the Allied forces numbered 105,000 casualties, and the Germans suffered 80,000 casualties. Both sides suffered greatly and lost a great deal of lives in one of the bloodiest and longest lasting battles of the Italian campaign. But what is remembered the most is the monastery lost atop the hill at Monte Cassino. Now let's look at the men that played huge roles in this battle. British statesman, military commander, and writer Sir Winston Churchill is most remembered for his leadership as the country's Prime Minister during World War II. On November 30th, 1874, Winston Churchill was born in Oxfordshire, England, at Blenheim Palace into a wealthy family. He was the son of American socialite Jennie Jerome and a well-known politician, Lord Randolph Churchill. Before entering politics, Churchill had a lengthy and diverse military career. He was a British Army cavalry officer who participated in several wars, notably the Boer War in South Africa, and he was also a war correspondent. During World War II, Churchill played a pivotal role as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, holding the position from 1940 to 1945, and again from 1951 to 1955. For his leadership during this pivotal time in British history, he is highly regarded. Churchill's resistance to Nazi Germany and his ability to mobilize the British people against the invasion threat typified his leadership during World War II. To coordinate the war effort, he forged close ties with the other Allied leaders such as Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin and American President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Churchill remained a significant figure in British politics and world affairs after the war. In 1953, he was granted the Nobel Prize in Literature in recognition of his historical essays and lectures. Many people consider Churchill to be one of the best wartime leaders in history. He gained worldwide respect and affection for his bravery, leadership, tenacity throughout World War II. Albert Kesselring was a German field marshal who served in the Second World War. He was standing in the other corner. One of the most accomplished military leaders in Nazi Germany and was influential in numerous war theaters. In 1904, Kesselring enlisted in the German army, and he subsequently became a member of the Imperial German Air Service during the First World War. He flew fighters and scouting missions, winning the Iron Cross for his valor. Kesselring continued to serve in the military following World War I, joining the newly established Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force in the 1930s. Because of his leadership abilities and strategic intelligence, he advanced through the ranks very rapidly. Kesselring was renowned for his clever tactical retreats that, in the face of overwhelming Allied advances, allowed German forces to preserve their supplies and power. His troops nicknamed him "Smiling Albert" because of his skills at making calculated retreats while dealing significant casualties to the opponents. Kesselring's legacy has been damaged by his involvement in war crimes, especially in Italy, despite his military prowess. During the German occupation of Italy, he was connected to the murder of civilians and the deportation of Italian Jews. Now on to General Mark Clark. American military officer General Mark Wayne Clark was heavily involved in both the Korean and the Second World Wars. An important part of organizing and arranging the attack on Monte Cassino was played by Clark. In order to create the operational plans and make sure that the various Allied troops efficiently coordinated and supported one another, he collaborated with his lower commanders. Throughout the conflict, Clark had to make important choices in his role as the overall commander. This involved choosing when and how to launch attacks, allocating resources, and modifying strategy in response to shifting battlefield circumstances. General Jeffrey Keyes. On October 30th, 1888, at Fort Bayard, New Mexico, Jeffrey Keyes was born. After completing his studies at West Point's United States Military Academy in 1913, he held a number of roles in the American Army. Keyes was heavily involved in a number of campaigns during World War II, including those in North Africa and Italy. In the Italian campaign, he then led the Second Corps as its commander after serving as its commander in the North African campaign, commanding his army in engagements like the Siege of Rome and the Battle of Monte Cassino. In order to coordinate Allied activity in Italy, he collaborated closely with Allied leaders including General Mark W. Clark. These great leaders had a very important role, as you can see the diversity coming from the Allied nations. These nations worked together to defeat a very powerful German force in a land that they were very unfamiliar with. On the other hand, Hitler and Kesselring had very limited diversity, as they only had Germany and Italy for the most part in this war. Those two used the advantage some may call home field advantage to fend off the Allied powers for as long as they could. Here is my works cited. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a great day.